Reversals are one of those topics that kind of come and go in the ACH network as far as the questions that we get, the number of reversals that we see, but they're out there. It's a mechanism to help recall payments, maybe if there is a duplicate or an erroneous entry. But we do have this reversal process. I know it gets rather confusing because it's only allowable in certain situations. So if you have questions about reversals, we've got a slide in here that's going to point you back to the Treasury Management folks over at CCF. They would be happy to talk with you about the situation and help you determine if a reversal is truly allowable, if it's warranted, if it's going to resolve the issue. So let's talk about ACH recall. So ACH originator, ODFI, we don't have the right to recall an entry or make adjustment to an entry or stop payment to an entry once it has been received by the ACH operator. So what this looks like to me is that when I was at the bank and I was sending our ACH files, once I hit submit and I sent that file onto the ACH operator, I couldn't just pull it back, right? I could reach out at my computer screen, I could try all I wanted, that file's not coming back to me. There are a few exceptions here. There are reversal, so there's reversing files, there's also reversing entries, and then there's what we call a reclamation or a written demand for payment. Those are used after the death of a receiver for a credit entry. Not going to talk about those today, but if that's something you do, that is an exception to this file recall ability. So essentially what we're saying is when you send an ACH entry, you should be sure that that entry is authorized, it is correct, it has all the right information, because if it's not, you may not be able to get that money back. All right, so reversal. This is going to be an entry or a file that reverses an erroneous entry or file. So, right, we're reversing something that was erroneous. It may allow for the originator, the ODFI, or the operator to rectify an erroneous entry that was sent to a receiver. And I say may because it doesn't always, right? If we are attempting to reverse a credit that was sent and that money has been spent, funds aren't available, we're probably not getting our money back. And let's look at a scenario here where we can see that. All right, so here we have our T account where we're going to track our individual debits and credits to this particular account. And we're going to use this to illustrate how the reversal process might work. So on October 27th, an employer sends his employee's payroll file out to the ODFI with the intent that it will post to the employee's account on October the 29th, which is their payday. So here we have our file going out into the network. Over the weekend, an employee notices that the amount is $500 short of what it should be, and he contacts the employer to address the shortage. The employer acknowledges the error and asks the employee to leave the entire $1,000 in his account in order for the employer to conduct a reversal on Monday. So then on Monday, on November the 11th, the employer sends that same day ACH reversing debit to the ODFI to ensure that that entry is pulled back from the employee. At this point, the receiver's account is back where it started prior to the erroneous entry. Because the employee still needs to be receive their correct amount of payroll, the employer also sends that same day correcting payroll credit for the correct amount. And now the employee has been paid and they have the correct amount of money in their account. What's important to understand is it doesn't always go this smooth. So let's say that that receiver didn't leave the $1,000 in their account and we were not able to post that reversing debit. That could cause some serious issues. So doesn't always rectify a situation like it does here. This is in a perfect world how a reversal would work. All right, so a couple things to understand. We have reversing file, which means everything in the file was wrong or a duplicate. We're affecting all of the entries. Or we have a reversing entry, which would be less than that. Maybe there's only one entry that's wrong, or maybe there's 5 entries that are wrong. It's not the entire file. So that's our 2 columns here. So reversing file on the left, reversing entry on the right. So who is going to initiate those? It's going to vary. So depending who had the issue, right? Generally not going to see an ACH operator initiating or reversing entry, but originator and ODFI fall on both sides here. All right, timing here. So the timing to transmit our reversing file is within 5 banking days of the settlement. So if we don't discover the error until beyond that 5 banking day period, we cannot do a reversal. 5 days is the outside maximum for us for both the reversing file and for the reversing entry. Now, when it comes to a reversing file, we have an additional requirement to transmit within 24 hours of discovery. So once we figure out that there's an error, we have 24 hours not to extend beyond that 5-day banking period that we just talked about. That's for a reversing file. In reality, the sooner the better. So if you have a reversing entry, even though we don't have that 24-hour stipulation, my advice would be to get that thing out the door as soon as possible, because the sooner you send that reversal, the better your chances are of recovering those funds. All right, so do we need to send a correcting file? Well, if we have a reversing file, yes, unless it's a duplicate, that's going to make things worse. Not a requirement for a reversing entry. Company entry description for both is going to be the word reversal in all capital letters. So that is a requirement for the formatting of a reversal, whether that is a file or an entry. And then, do we have an obligation to notify the receiver? For a reversing entry, yes, we have to make a reasonable attempt to notify the receiver. That doesn't exist on the file side, but again, best practice would be to attempt to notify that receiver prior to sending that reversal. Again, that's going to give you the better chance of recovering those funds. And then indemnity, right? So when we're looking at the file, whomever is originating that reversal is making an indemnity to everyone else, that if there's a loss, they're going to take it. On the reversing entry, ODFI indemnifies RDFI and ACH operator. So that's what we're looking at here, is we're making a promise that, hey, if something goes wrong here and you suffer a loss because of my reversal, we'll make you whole with that indemnity. All right, so let's talk about which party can transmit a reversing file or entry. So we have reversing files, we have reversing entries. Reversing file, we can do this for a duplicate, meaning this is a duplicate, we've already sent this file. So we're sending it again by mistake, right? We could do a reversing file. Wrong amount, meaning all of the entries in that file have the wrong amount. Wrong receiver, meaning all of those entries are for the wrong receivers. Let's say you grabbed a template for your payroll file and you accidentally grabbed your accounts payable folks and you sent to the accounts payable receivers instead of the payroll receivers. That would be an example of wrong receiver. And then the last one is related to a date. So if we have a debit that is going to be earlier than what was authorized, or a credit that is later than intended, then we could do a reversing file. For a reversing entry, very similar. We still have duplicate, we still have wrong amount, we still have wrong receiver, we still have that debit or credit earlier or later than intended. There is a carve out here for reversing entries for an employee that was paid the same amount via check and an ACH credit. So there are states that require when an employee, their employment ends, they're terminated, that they are handed a check as they walk out the door on their last day. If their ACH entry for that same amount or for that same payroll was already on its way to that former employee's bank account, you could do a reversing entry. So there is a stipulation there. When an employee basically is being paid twice, you can pull back that ACH credit because you paid them by check when their employment separated. The UMACHA rules state that reversal for any other reason other than the ones listed here are prohibited. So some things you don't see on this list would be like failed settlement, meaning the originator doesn't have enough money to fund the payroll file or to fund the credits, not allowable for a reversal. Or issues with goods and services, right? If somebody is purchasing an item, the item arrives and it's broken. We can't do a reversal for that. So business email compromise, scams, and fraud also fall under this not allowed. We cannot do a reversal for those reasons. Has to be the reasons that are allowable for reversals. So This slide here kind of sums up what we talked about and adds a few more details that we need to know related to reversals, but we do have those contacts. So we have Josh and we have Bob listed here. We've got a Treasury management email address. We've got a phone number. So if you're looking to do a reversal or you think you might need to do a reversal, reach out to those folks, right? They're there to answer the questions to make sure that your reversals are allowable, that they're timely, that they're compliant. If they have any questions, they're welcome to reach out to us as well. We can talk about it, but really making sure that those reversals are going to be done properly. Okay, so other things to know about reversals. So if we have a debit reversal, it cannot contain an effective entry date earlier than the effective entry date of the credit to which it relates. So let's talk about an example here. Let's say that UMACHA sends my payroll twice. So payday is on Friday, and on Wednesday, they sent my payroll twice. They shouldn't be sending that debit reversal to post to my account any earlier than Friday, because if it debits my account on Thursday, I don't have the credit yet. I may not have enough money to fund that reversing debit. So that's what we talk about when we say the reversing debit shouldn't have an effective entry date any earlier than the effective date of that credit for which it relates. Couple other formatting things to keep in mind. So we talked about reversal in all capital letters is part of the requirements here, but a couple of fields need to be identical to the original entry, and that would be the standard entry class code, the company ID and originator ID, and the amount. So we shouldn't have an amount that is different. Remember, our example was that they were shorted $500. It wouldn't send just a $500 entry, right? We want to send it for the full amount. That way it washes to zero with that incorrect entry. And then we're going to send a corrected entry afterward for the right amount, right? Or for the full amount. So amount is always going to be identical to the original entry or the incorrect entry that went. We have a note here that the originator name can be modified slightly. So what I think here is like Walmart with the dash and without the dash. Like if I look at that, I know it's Walmart, whether it has a dash or not. So that's what we're talking about here. It needs to remain easily recognizable to the receiver. I need to look at that reversing entry and know that it's coming from your company. But if we have things like and spelled out or and with an ampersand, those would be allowable, right? Or like I mentioned, like a dash versus not having a dash or a space. Those things are totally fine. But ultimately, your receiver needs to be able to look at that and know, oh, that is coming from this company that sent me an entry already. I should be able to see that and identify it easily on my statement.